So Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, is right around the corner, and unfortunately I will not have a review out for that by the end of the year. It looks really good and I will be getting it eventually, but I still haven't played through the New Order or Old Blood yet, and I'd like to play those first before diving into the new Colossus. And since there's so many games I'm trying to work through right now, I'm just not going to get it done in an hourly amount of time. Still, I want to get in on the Wolfenstein fun, so I thought I'd take a trip back to the classic Wolfenstein 3D and look at some of the modern and not so modern clones that the game spawned throughout the years. Wolfenstein actually started as a action-adventure game, not a first-person shooter. And can I just say for a second that while I'm typing this out on Word, it actually recognizes Wolfenstein as a real word? That's really cool, and that says a lot about the legacy of this game. Anyway, Castle Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein were created by Muse Software for the Apple II, DOS, Atari 8-bit, and Commodore 64 back in 1981 and 1984 respectively. They were more of a isometric stealth action game, think similar to the first Metal Gear game, though they were still set in an alternative horror fantasy World War II setting. The games released to generally positive reviews, though as a franchise, Wolfenstein never really took off until the third entry, Wolfenstein 3D. Wolfenstein 3D turned the gaming world on its head. While technically not the first FPS game in existence, that would be Maze War, released in 1974, Wolfenstein 3 is the godfather for what the modern FPS looks like today. In a sense, this video is redundant because every first-person shooter since Wolfenstein 3D could be considered a Wolfenstein clone. But I'm only going to include some specific criteria, which I will get to shortly. Wolfenstein 3D and its prequel, Spear of Destiny, were both released in 1992. Both were developed by id Software, also known for creating Commander Keen and eventually Doom and Quake. Wolfenstein 3D was published by Apogee Software, who later became 3D Realms, and that gave us Duke Nukem and Shadow Warrior. Spear of Destiny was published by FormGen. Wolfenstein 3D isn't true 3D, but rather 2D sprites built and angled on a plane to look like 3D. This style of 2D looking 3D would become the standard for many years to come. Wolfenstein was characterized as a fast-paced first-person shooter. You never reloaded, you could carry multiple guns at a time, there were secret areas to find, sometimes leading to secret levels, a multitude of enemies to kill, bosses to fight. The gameplay was entirely horizontal, there were no slopes and stairs. For the sake of this video and what makes a game a Wolfenstein clone, it's as follows. Horizontal gameplay, again no slopes or stairs or upper levels. Fast-paced, corridor-like gameplay, able to hold all weapons at once, and a 2D sprite look to the game. Several other Wolfenstein games would follow after Wolfenstein 3D, and though they deviated from the original gameplay style, they maintained the feel of the classic game. These included Return to Castle Wolfenstein, developed by Grey Matter Interactive and published by Activision, released in 2001, Wolfenstein, developed by Raven Software and published by Activision, released in 2009. This entry is often forgot about in the series. Wolfenstein RPG, developed by id, published by EA. This was a mobile RPG and eventually revealed that Wolfenstein and the Doom games were related in their lore. Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, developed by Splash Damage and produced by Activision, released in 2003. This was the first multiplayer-only Wolfenstein game. And lastly, Wolfenstein The New Order, The Old Blood, and the up-and-coming New Colossus are all developed by Machine Games and published by Bethesda, which were released in 2014, 2015, and this year, respectively. This actually surprises me a little bit because I 100% thought that id was still the ones working on Wolfenstein. I had no idea that they were no longer working on the series. First game we're going to take a look at is Skyfall. Skyfall released this year. Skyfall is as bare bones as it gets, and I feel like Skyfall was made by one person, but the credits say it was made by a AYE technology, which I have never heard of before. Graphics are a basic bit-style creation. Guns are rudimentary, and there isn't a lot of variation in the weapons, including a handgun, a machine gun, and a shotgun. The level environments are repetitive and enemy designs don't really mesh. You start off fighting some zombie scientists that eventually get some space marines, then some alien monsters, then space marines infected with aliens. Obviously this is a sci-fi shooter, but I couldn't tell you a story. There's no dialogue or text to be found throughout the game. The music doesn't really mesh well at all, and honestly is bad and gets rather repetitive too. The description for the game reads, 2217, distant future. We act as an engineer named Fox. It's a girl. At the beginning of the game, it comes the order to disable the protection system in the complex where she works. That they want to make a diagnosis. Very nonsensical and is obviously broken English, and apparently you're a girl? Whatever. That's not important. Games like Doom and Wolfenstein weren't story-driven games and weren't plot-heavy, but you at least had some text set up at the beginning and end of each chapter explaining what you were doing. This game just throws you right into it. The levels aren't super interesting. Like I said, they all look the same and become repetitive. Towards the end of the game, I'm fairly certain that you have to replay the same level multiple times. Levels only take a couple of minutes to play through, and most you can probably get through in a matter of seconds. Unlike in Wolfenstein, there are no complex labyrinths to maneuver through, no keys or switches to find and open doors, and worst of all, no secret areas, with the exception of some areas containing gold gems, which don't really do anything other than give you some useless points at the end of a mission. The lack of real secrets and hidden levels really hinder the replay value of Skyfall. Enemies deplete your health way too quickly as well. If the zombies at the beginning corner you, you will die in a matter of seconds, and the ranged enemy do crazy fast damage for being hidden in ways that will always be impossible to dodge unless you know that they're already there. That being said, there is an abundance of health and ammo laying around the entire game, so even if you do lose health very quickly, you won't find yourself dying very often unless you allow yourself to get trapped or don't react quickly enough to being attacked. Interestingly, all weapons will use the same ammo. The ammo laying around just adds to whatever weapon you have equipped at that time of pickup. You also don't need to reload, which is a plus. The end game was really weird too. The last 4 levels are just bizarre. The third to last is the exact same map as the fourth to last, but the enemies are placed differently, and this blue box is in a different spot. The entire game, you're just moving from point A to point B to open a door, and then out of nowhere, they just make an objective where you need to find this blue box. This is never conveyed in the game. Luckily, I've been playing games my whole life, and I'm not an idiot, so when I see something new on the ground, my first instinct is to pick it up. But then the game doesn't tell you what to do with it. So again, since I'm not an idiot, using my deductive reasoning and realizing there is nowhere else to go, you have to backtrack to the beginning of the level and press the Use button on a computer in the first room, bringing you to the next respective level. The second to last level suddenly brings you to a third-person perspective and gives you a really shitty gun that has 5 bullets, and you're fighting a giant, really fast alien. You basically have to circle the map collecting ammo as you slowly chip away at its health. And the last level is a linear room where you slowly walk towards a white light and the game ends. Overall, Skyfall is not great. It's decent enough, but it doesn't really go anywhere and is honestly pretty boring from an art direction perspective. Its biggest flaw is how generic it is. The game cost me less than $3, which is really cheap for an okay game, but I finished the whole thing in an hour and 20 minutes, which is really bad. It definitely has the feeling of shovelware. Unless you're really dying for a fix for a old school Wolfenstein-like game, I probably wouldn't suggest Skyfall, and I would steer you towards some of our later entries. Okay, so doing some post-play research into the game, it looks like many of the assets are unoriginal. I believe the sprites are original, but the sound effects are ripped from a library of sounds. This isn't too bad, but the music, which I mentioned doesn't mesh with the game at all, is actually ripped from Command & Conquer 3, which is straight up copyright infringement and totally illegal and not okay. The second game on the list is Intrude. You may remember seeing a clip for this at the beginning of my 2016 Games of the Year list. Again, Intrude doesn't look like much from a graphical standpoint. Graphics are basic and chippy, old school Wolfenstein looking. The gameplay is typical linear Wolfenstein-like too. There's no jumping and, like Skyfall, no vertical areas in the map either. Intrude was created by one person, Michael Kruba, and while it's not the most impressive game ever made, it's kinda cool to see a game made by one person that required an entire team, id Software being this case, to develop in the past. Story is minimal, if non-existent. Basically, you have to fight your way through a military base that has suddenly become overrun with a secret private military. And that's really it. There are secrets in Intrude, however, the classic secret place idea popularized by games like Wolfenstein, Doom, and Duke Nukem. The entrances to these places include things like destructible walls and even false walls that you can walk through. The amount of enemies you kill, barrels destroy, and secrets you find, and hidden data cores you find are all tallied up at the end of each level. Finding all of the cores gives you some ending dialogue, though it really doesn't explain what the hell is going on in the game. The game is relatively short, consisting of only 15 levels, and you can beat the game in about 2 or 3 hours, but the game only saves when you finish a level, meaning you can't save your way through levels like you can in Wolfenstein or Doom, which makes it fairly challenging at times. Some levels I found to be outright frustrating, especially because when you die or finish a level, it doesn't start you off with full health, so sometimes you're starting off a difficult level with like 20 hit points. The biggest negative I feel is that you can't go back through the levels you've already finished. This means if you miss something in the game, you can't go back and find what you're missing without starting the entire game over, and there's only one save file. It's a major pain in the ass. I made it through the entire game finding everything and missed 2 fucking barrels in the last level. I was pissed. It's total bullshit that you can't go and find things that you miss. At the very least, there should be a checklist with the things you need to find so that you can find everything before you finish the level, but there's nothing like that. That said, I really liked Intrude. It's simple and short, but it's really fun. The levels are nicely designed, enemies are basic, but work for the overall vibe of the game that it was going for. Guns feel responsive and fun to shoot, though I did find health and ammo pickups to be a little on the low side. I started running out of ammo frequently. The guns include a pistol, a shotgun, a Gatling gun, a rocket launcher, and of course you don't need to reload any of these weapons. You also get a knife for melee if you run out of ammo. The guns work exactly as you'd expect in a game like this. The game feels fast, movement is fluid, and there's enough room for strafing, aiming, and it feels natural. The controls are all standard and intuitive. All around, the game was well put together. The music is filled with a sort of rock-driven riff. It's not amazing, but it doesn't really get old either. It could use some variation as there are only like 5 songs that repeat throughout the game, but it works. Overall, I would definitely recommend this game. It's not perfect, but it's a lot of fun, and it's only $4, and it captures a lot of the feel that made Wolfenstein 3D great. If you're into these kind of games, I'd say pick it up. The next game on the list is Mad Sector. This game is even more shovelware bullshit than Skyfall was. At least Skyfall was playable, this game is just ass. Like the other games, Skyfall was made by one person who goes by Wreck. The game starts up with a message from an evil AI kind of thing. It's actually a unique setting for one of these kind of games, that you aren't fighting aliens or demons or soldiers, but an evil AI. But it's still bare bones. Barely existent story. I almost gave up on the first level. Look, when you go into a classic FPS, you don't want to waste time walking around doing nothing. If you aren't killing things in the first few seconds of the game, your game is wrong. Plain and simple. And Mad Sector is wrong. The first area of the game is this weird all-black area with green words acting as walls. You eventually find a crossroads leading to a giant eye wall, and you can't do anything in there. Or a room with a bunch of smaller rooms where you seemingly can't go anywhere with them. I walked around for like 10 minutes before figuring out what you had to do. I'm just going to flat out come out and say it. I do not recommend Mad Sector, but if you are a masochist and try it, here's how you do the first level. Once you get the key, you can open the eye door, leading to the second level. This is where things go from crappy to shitty really fast. First off, look at this fucking arm. Who the hell holds a gun like this? Why is it pointing off to the side? Why isn't it centered or near your side like literally every other FPS? The graphics are abysmal. Look, these other games weren't extremely detailed, but they were bit style, and at least they had style and substance. They were retro. This looks like ass. Movement doesn't feel good, strafing doesn't feel quite right, and it seems like you're always bumping into walls. This is especially problematic in close quarters hallways, as it makes strafing to dodge enemy fire impossible. Your guns do very little damage, and you seemingly have to be right on top of the enemies to do damage too, which makes the need to strafe that much more pressing. It just sucks. They don't give you enough ammo for how many hits you need to take to kill these stupid things. Not to mention the game is just straight up unfinished. You can see enemy bullets going through walls. It's just lazy. I got to the second level and gave up. It took me about 30 minutes to get to that point, and I could already tell this was going downhill really fast. This is my second game that I've ever refunded, actually, the first being that disaster Amok that I reviewed last year. I think I made the right choice giving up at this point. The few reviews from people who have also played this game report the game straight up breaks and becomes unpassable past level 2 anyways, so fuck it.
The mic break, the guns that sound brass, the guns that strike fast, the guns with 6 cents, the guns that hate tax, the guns that wear vests, the guns with fake names.
The next game on the list is Godz, and this is by far the best game in the video. Godz was released in 2013 by Vlambeer, a small, indie game team most famous for their work on Nuclear Throne, which I have never actually played but have heard really good things about. The final boss from Godz is even in Nuclear Throne. I have played Vlambeer's game Super Crate Box, and that is also a lot of fun. Anyway, everything about Godz is great. The gunplay is smooth and fun to play, aiming and strafing feels right, enemy types are varied and interesting, guns are great to use, though they are a little on generic side, there's no reloading, levels are fun to play through, and there are even hidden levels if extra objectives are met on enough levels. These extra objectives include things like finishing a level in par, killing all the enemies in a level, and getting all the items in a level. It's also the most unique game on the list, and is a unique game in general. Godz is a hip-hop sci-fi shooter. The game takes place on Venus, and the story is basically that you are placed in a prison in the basement of a hotel owned by an evil hip-hop record label, and you have to fight your way through the top to defeat the evil young Venus, who is the gun god of Venus. And all the music is Venetian hip-hop, or hip-hop in the language of Venus. It's really cool, and I love how creative the whole theme of the game and design was. Godz is by far the most chaotic too, incredibly fast-paced, there is no downtime in this game. It's constant killing and running. Levels are short enough where you don't get lost too. The game is pretty short, only 12 levels with 4 hidden levels, and can be beaten in a couple of hours, but the game is 100% free, so I'm fine with how short it is. Of all these games, if I had to recommend one, Godz would be it. You can download it on Vlambeer's website or wait a little while for the Steam release, which should be coming out soon. Either way, this game is really fun. Alright, here we are with the last game for the video. A game that pretty much everyone has heard of. The infamous Super Noah's Ark 3D. Noah's Ark 3D was originally released for the Super Nintendo in 1994. The year I was born, actually. It was created by a company called Wisdom Tree, famous for creating Christian-themed games, infamous for creating unofficial games. That's right, Super Noah's Ark 3D was an unofficially released game, as Nintendo didn't give the okay for it to be released on their console. In fact, Noah's Ark is the only Super Nintendo game that is unofficial. The cart itself actually looked more like the Sonic & Knuckles cart. You know, this guy. Instead of a normal SNES cart. To get it to work, you actually needed to plug in an official SNES game into the Noah's Ark cartridge to bypass the SNES's protection lockout. That's insane. Noah's Ark 3D is actually a total conversion of Wolfenstein 3D as well. It plays the exact same, only instead of guns you have a variety of slingshots, and instead of killing Nazis you're putting farm animals to sleep. What the fuck? Whose idea was this? You know, looking into this game, I found out that they were originally going to make a Hellraiser game. Yes, they were going to make a first-person shooter based on the Hellraiser horror movie franchise. A Christian video game company. And the only reason they decided not to go forward with the Hellraiser theme was because they thought it clashed with the Christian identity of the company. Yeah, I'd say so. Anyways, I thought Noah only had 2 of each animal. Why are there so many damn goats on this boat? The game has secrets too. I find these secrets easier to discover than in Wolfenstein because they usually have a different texture than the rest of the wall, making it pretty obvious, but I like that they have secrets in the game at all. There are also these little blocks which bring up trivia questions as well. These questions pertain to the Noah Bible story. Getting them right rewards you with health, and as far as I can tell, getting them wrong does nothing, other than sending you to the fired pits of hell for being a godless heathen, and knowing nothing about what animals left the Ark first. The only issues I have with the game is the hit detection and the amount of damage enemies deal. I have a hard time telling if I hit an enemy or not. They don't really react to it or make a noise, they just kind of fall asleep. And this is really annoying against bosses because I can't tell if they are being damaged or not. And the animal's spit, yes, spit, travels way too fast for how much damage they deal. You can die in a matter of seconds, even at full health, and if you run out of slingshot ammo, forget it, because your little shake weight ain't doing shit on these guys. That said, Super Noah's Ark 3D is actually a pretty well made and fun game. If you want to get your kids into something a little more kid friendly, go ahead and buy it. It's a good, solid game. It's just really, really weird. So there you have it, alternatives to the classic Wolfenstein 3D, just in time for the new Wolfenstein game to come out next month. So yeah, go punch some Nazis or something like a real American.